Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 11th, 2018 Board of Supervisors meeting. Before we start our meeting, I would like to observe a moment of silence in memory of the events that happened 17 years ago and changed our country. So if you please join me in a moment of silence, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. We'll now do the flag salute, which I'll be leading this morning. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll now ask for approval of the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda have been recommended for approval by the County Executive Department. All items will be approved by a single roll call vote. Anyone may ask to address consent items prior to the board taking action, and the item may be moved for discussion. Does the board have any consent items they wish to discuss? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that has any consent items they wish to pull off for discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for approval. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Duran. Yes. Wygant. Yes. Euler. Yes. Montgomery. Yes. Holmes.
We have one abstention? All right. Aye. Yes. Okay. This is the time for public comments. Persons may address the board on items not on this agenda. Please limit comments to 3 minutes per person, since the time allocated for public comment is 15 minutes. If all comments cannot be heard within the 15-minute time limit, the public comment period will be taken up at the end of the regular session. The board is not permitted to take any action on items addressed under public comment. Mr. Cutler, is that your?
Yes.
We have a lieutenant from, a colonel from Beale Air Force Base that's going to address us under public comment. Colonel, can you come forward now? And thank you. This is Colonel Andrew Clark. He is the commander of the 9th Reconnaissance Wing, Beale Air Force Base, California. He is responsible for the combined efforts of approximately 7,000 military, civilian, and contractor personnel and the entire Air Force high-altitude Reconnaissance fleet. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. It's comprised of 5 groups and 5 overseas operating locations which execute worldwide missions in support of 6 geographic combatant commanders with annual flying allocation of more than 22,000 hours. Colonel Clark entered active duty in January 1996 following the commission from the Reserve Officer Training Corps at the University of Wisconsin. He is a command pilot with over 3,800 hours in air flight. He has over 1,200 combat hours accumulated during missions in Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. He has been an evaluator and instructor pilot in the U.S. Air Force. Mr. Colonel Clark, please.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to come out here today, especially on a day like September 11th. And I think this is the first time the 9th Reconnaissance Wing Commander has visited y'all. So it's a fantastic opportunity to talk about what we do out at Beale and the impact it has on your community. A little bit about myself. You mentioned it. I joined the Air Force in 1995. I'm originally from Wisconsin. Northern California it was foreign to me when I arrived here in 2004. But since 2004, I've been stationed at Beale three separate times, and I've lived in Rockland and Roseville, Sacramento, Grass Valley, and on Beale Air Force Base. So my wife and I consider this our second home now. So the opportunity to come and speak to you today is obviously one I welcome. Beale Air Force Base is the home of high-altitude reconnaissance in the Air Force. Over 7,000 folks stationed out there with dependents, with family members. We're looking at about 12,000 people there. And then with our retiree population as well, we have about 25,000 folks that utilize Beale Air Force Base. I mentioned high-altitude reconnaissance. We have 2 platforms out there, the U-2 Dragon Lady and the RQ-4 Global Hawk unmanned platform. Both of those jets do high altitude. They collect images, signals for dissemination to intelligence authorities, and then we support everywhere from the president on down to a corporal out in the field with the intelligence we collect. Fundamental to warfare and fundamental to how we protect and defend the nation. It's also home to our Air Force Reserve Command KC-135 tankers, so we have a reserve population there and an Air National Guard population. So our citizen airmen also work out at Beale, and they contribute about 1,200 folks as well. Beale itself, as far as the Air Force is concerned, and a lot of people don't know this, it is the center of technological development when it comes to intelligence collection and reconnaissance. So we are always growing. We're always getting bigger. In fact, to add to about the 7,000 folks we have there now, we're going to be plussing up to 500 to 1,500 more people in the next few months. And so what does that mean for you? Of those 7,000 airmen, approximately 600 to 700 of those live in Placer County right now, and that has grown dramatically in the last couple of years, probably 100 to 200% increase every year. And with those 700 folks bring their families, so we're talking on the order of 2,500 to 3,000 people that live in Placer County, and then I would say just about everybody on Beale uses Placer County for recreation and getting out and about. So it is a significant impact to the county. Economic impact from 2017 was $627 million is how much money activities up at Beale are bringing in to the local community. And when I say community, that's ultimately why I'm here. We call Beale the Beale community. It is part of your community because most of the airmen on that base, 80% of the airmen, and I'm talking civilian, contractor, blue suit airmen, live in your community. So our community is yours. So ultimately, I'm completely dependent upon my local community for support as we execute our mission. So with that in mind, I would ask that if there's anything we can do for you to better the relationship between our community, that's my ask, and that's what I would want from my local community. So that's really all I had to say for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions, field any comments.
Thank you, Colonel. What can we do for you to kind of help that collaboration?
Sure. So my primary concern, I have to provide, we're a force provider to downrange combatant commanders. So I have to provide combat power in the form of reconnaissance. And to do that, I need healthy and able airmen. So anything that can be done to enhance their quality of life, whether it's infrastructure, local roads, those kinds of things, housing. I have a tremendous issue with housing right now.
Yeah, we're dealing with it.
I don't have enough houses on base for my airmen, so they end up living in the local community. And many of them obviously call Placer County home.
Right.
So anything we can do to enhance the availability of housing, and then all the infrastructure that goes on with it. And then there's a security piece of it. Are they secure? Are they safe? Local law enforcement, fire department, all the other pieces of infrastructure that you provide, I count on that to make sure my airmen are safe. So those are my big asks from the county.
Good. Thank you. Supervisor Guler has a comment.
Yeah, I have questions just operationally.
Sure.
Obviously, U-2 is a bit of an aged plane. Global Hawk is really cool, but are we ever going to see anything like the Blackbird again, or are those days just gone?
So let me talk about the U-2 for a second. U-2, the name U-2 is old. The platform we're flying right now is state-of-the-art. Completely, it's 30% larger airframe than the original U-2. The sensors...
Yeah, but it's not 3 times the speed of sound. I mean,
it's not 3 times the speed of sound.
There's nothing as cool as the Blackbird.
But the SR-70 was retired and the U-2 is
I know.
So I will say
That's what I'm wondering. Are we ever going to see something like that back?
So we're always looking at new sensors and new capabilities to put on our platforms. And when the Air Force asks us to start looking at those things, it's always with a mind to the future. So those sensors that we're building now, the U-2 is becoming a truck to test new stuff. So that when 10, 20 years from now, when we have new platforms and we're fielding new technology, U-2 is the one getting those sensors ready for that. I think that's as far as I want to take that conversation.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Supervisor Montgomery would like to make a comment.
Well, I mainly wanted to say thank you for your service, but also extend the offer in terms of what we can offer to your community, I want to make sure that it's really clear that that goes for spouses, children.
Yes.
We're not talking about just active military personnel, but their families. So if there's anything on that side that we can help with, please let us know as well.
I will. And in fact, when I say ready and healthy airmen, that's my other half of my job. It's sending guys downrange to go fight, but it's taking care of those families on the backside of that, the folks that are still back here, because that guy or gal can't execute their mission unless they know their family is safe and well cared for. So I won't hesitate to reach out when I have an issue. And frankly, I think most of the folks, specifically in Placer County, are very happy being there. There's a reason that the Wheatland Gate, that's the gate that is closest to Placer County and to Marysville. I'm sorry, my town's all messed up. Roseville, Lincoln, Rockland, all those towns. That gate is the busiest gate we have because of the growth within that area. So I'm happy with it, and I will not hesitate to reach out. I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Colonel Clark, and thank you for your service, and please convey our grateful thanks for all your airmen. We really appreciate your involvement in our community, and we really appreciate you coming today to speak to us, particularly on this very important day. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. Take care.
All right. Now we'll open the regular public comment. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate that.
No problem. Good morning, Bradley Cutler from Granite Bay. I'd like to reiterate Colonel Clark's wishes to have a ready, happy, and healthy bunch of servicemen available here through the efforts that you have initiated but seem to have stalled out on. And with that, I refer back to the multipurpose trail that was one of the conditions of approval for the Tree Lake project. And the original conditions back in 1999 stated that the trail would be 10 feet wide and would avoid removal of trees. The grading would be kept to a minimum. It would be similar to the existing trail that existed just nearby. It would accommodate all, of course, the erosion control, and that the excessive clearing was not to be had, and the crossing of the wetlands be reviewed by the Parks and Rec, and the developer would be responsible for securing necessary approvals from Fish and Game at the time. It's now Fish and Wildlife Department of the state. So we wondered what happened. It's been 9 months, 10 months since we first brought this up, and it's gone silent, and the conditions have not been met. So what's happened? What happened to the trail design on the improvement plans? On the improvement plans, the multipurpose trail was not identified, designed, or depicted as required. The easement of the trail was shown marching through a drainage ditch with scores of trees would have to be removed. And then it went through the deepest part of the wetlands and through the center of an electric tower. Obviously, that didn't happen. The grading for the trail was completely ignored, and the improvement plans drawn without a single bit of consideration for the trail and should not have been accepted. But marching on, the trail wasn't designed similarly to the connecting trail because it had contained 3 or 4 90-degree turns, which are virtually impossible for bicyclists. I defer, yes, Mr. Carden, you'll object, but I'll concede that they're good for tricycles, but not bicycles. Erosion control is virtually impossible inside a drainage ditch, and the wetlands crossing was never considered, and the approval for crossing wetlands or being within the wetland setback limits never contemplated. Remember, the county denied that there was any wetlands on this property to begin with. If the trail is to be built, the Department of Fish and Wildlife will have to be contacted and plans drawn for their approval. This was stated by the Board of Supervisors decades ago and reiterated by the Department of Fish and Wildlife more recently. Of course, building outside the wetlands 100-foot setback will require relocating the tennis court, but that would be a little bit more costly to the Granite Bay taxpayers, so a commissioner can personally gain from the financial reward of a few more paid parking spaces on his site. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
It's good to see you, Supervisor Montgomery. I hope everything's well. Scott Vaughn, Granite Bay. On January 9th, we came before you, provided evidence that a trail was to be constructed. Bradley just told you what it was supposed to be. It doesn't look like it's going to come back before this Board of Supervisors. I've asked that it's come before. Doesn't seem to be something that's important to you guys to bring it back up, even though you directed staff to do so. So in my 3 minutes, every couple weeks, I'll bring you information on it. And I'm starting with what I call the secret agreement, which I don't believe the board saw. It was the abandonment agreement for this trail that was signed. It's included. What I would say about it is the county attorney, Clayton Cook, signed it with planning commissioner's Moss, legal representative. The easement exchange agreement granted Mr. Moss a certificate of occupancy, which normally you have to meet all sorts of requirements before you get the certificate of occupancy. You sign this, 5 days later you get it. This is another gift and special privilege. No one else would do that. You'd have to meet the conditions of approval. You'd have to meet all the requirements to get a certificate of occupancy for your business. That was not the case here, as you can see in the agreement that I've attached. The construction of the trail identified in the original agreement was required part of Tree Lake Terrace. Conditions of approval. The agreement granted sorry about my misnomer, the actual easement abandonment agreement granted occupancy. I've listed a Placer County code that says you shouldn't grant occupancy until all subdivision improvements are completed, which they weren't because it was the trail. When I appealed, used your forms, the business appeal, county council rejected my appeal and gave me no reason, just said rejected. I've included that as well for your review. This business has been operating for almost a year, and the subdivision improvements are still not done. So all that revenue, everything done, even though we did not get what was required in the original agreement. And so, once again, what I'm asking for is open, honest, transparent government, no selective enforcement for county officials, and I'm asking that you bring this before the Board of Supervisors so that we can discuss who builds the trail, who pays the money. Right now, if you move it as was originally planned with this easement abandonment, it'll cost taxpayers somewhere around $150,000 and save the developer, Planning Commissioner Moss, a requisite amount, as well as give him multiple more parking spaces in his area. So all I'll say is I'll cover some more in my next 3 minutes. And once again, it's good to see you again back, Supervisor Montgomery. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else under public comment? Good morning, sir.
Hi, my name is Tom Bartos, and I moved to Placer County in 1992 from Silicon Valley into high-tech industry. In 2007, I founded Horseshoe Bar Fish and Game Preserve, primarily for the ability to protect the environment and also to create a wilderness experience for fly fishing enthusiasts to enjoy the river and to be able to fish there. I also created it as for a vehicle to give back to the community so that I could help organizations and philanthropic and those not able to do the things that most people that have substantial income can do. I really want the preserve to become a vehicle to give back to the community. When I started fly fishing, I met up with a gentleman named Nick Stralchek, and I realized that he had a program that helped our wounded veterans recover. It was through fly fishing. And he told me about the benefits, and the more I learned about it, the more I wanted to do it, and I created our first event in 2008 where we brought seriously wounded veterans back to the property, and we taught them how to fly fish. In addition to teaching them how to fly fish, we give them the materials, the equipment needed to allow them to continue on. Boots, waders, fly rods, all the tools and accessories that, Bob, you know what you need in order to fly fish. It's the abundance of just the flies alone are hundreds of dollars. So we give this to our veterans to help them continue on. I want to tell you just a couple of quick stories about some of our veterans. One of our veterans was a giant of a man, and he served in the wars, and he came to the event, and unbeknownst to me, he had tried to commit suicide several weeks before. He came to the event, and after seeing what we were doing, he realized he could help others. He went back to American Samoa. He started teaching inner city kids the art of self-defense. But part of his program was, I'll teach you how to do this. You need to listen to what I have to say about making good decisions in life. Today he has 3 gymnasiums in American Samoa helping inner city kids. He also opened up a 50,000 square foot gymnasium in downtown Honolulu with the same idea of helping inner city kids make good decisions in life. I have other stories, but I know I'm running out of time. All I can say is that our veterans deserve to be able to come to this event, help them learn how to fly fish, because it really changes their lives. I know this because I hear from their families, I hear from their wives, I hear from their children. Good stories about what fly fishing has done to change their lives. So my reason for coming here today is that we're now being required to obtain permits to hold the event, to hold fire permits, which even though we just recently received approval from the fire department that it's safe to have events down there, and we're asking for your help and support and getting these fees waived, or at least contributing to help us continue on with this event. And I appreciate anything you can do.
So you've been doing this for 12 years now?
I've done this for 12 years.
Without any requirements?
I beg your pardon?
You've never had to have any permits?
I've never had to have any permits. I've never had to have any requirements. And it's just, we're being, there's a lot of things I want to do with this property.
Right.
I want to be able to give back to the community, the fly fishing clubs, the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, there's a whole variety of schools. I've had at least 6 schools to that property, teaching them about the environment and about the gold mining history. It has a long history, and I want to be able to continue to do that.
Okay, that's fine. I'll be glad to look into it. If my district director, Beverly Roberts, there, she'll give her her card, and then we can talk about this further. But Supervisor Montgomery has a comment.
I believe all of you have a copy of a book.
Yeah.
There are different years, but that's what we do. And if you look through that, you'll find that what we do is very helpful to our veterans.
Oh, fine. So Supervisor Montgomery.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today, Tom. I really appreciate it. I got your email and forwarded it to a couple of folks to say, hey, heads up, what can we do about this? I'm going to volunteer Supervisor Wygant as the other fly fisher person on this board to help me, since I also fly fish, to work with county staff as well to see what can we do, what is the latitude here, and how can we make sure that this event continues to occur?
Right now I'm not even sure of the status of our event because of different requirements that are being asked of us.
Okay, we'll be looking into this right away. Supervisor Duran, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment to say that thank you for what you do and what you provide to our veterans. But I would think that we should go one step further, because there are probably other groups that use property and are maybe impeded by certain fees and costs, that maybe we can create a policy that would take into consideration what they do and their contribution to the community. And I think that's something that we should look at.
All right,
for
very good.
everybody. So,
thank you for coming and sharing your concerns. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Kay Allen from Roosevelt, California, and I am a member of the Quilts of Balor Foundation, and it's been my honor and privilege to be able to meet with Tom Bartos at these Wounded Warrior retreats and award quilts to each of the men and women a couple times that have been in service to our country. The Quilts of Balor Foundation was started almost 15 years ago now by a woman, Catherine Roberts, who was asleep one night and had a dream. And she dreamed of a young man with his head in his hands and fighting what she termed his war demons. And in the next vision of her dream, she saw someone come and put a quilt around his shoulders. And the change in his demeanor was so apparent that she knew that possibly quilts could be a healing factor in the lives of these men and women who have served our country and had suffered physically and emotionally. So it started like 15 years ago, and there's been almost 196,000 quilts nationwide have been awarded to our warriors. The quilts, we hope, offer some comfort to these men and women for the service that they've given and the things that they've had to endure. I had, every time I speak of that dream and I come to the part of war demons, I see these men and women's tears come to their eyes every single time as I talk about that, because they understand that and they know that. Whether they themselves felt that way, they knew somebody who did. There was one soldier from Iwo Jima who watched that flag being raised there on Iwo Jima, and he said, "Today I still fight those war demons," and that the quilt meant a lot to him. At the Wounded Warrior Retreat, I remember speaking one time and one of the soldiers having to walk away to regain his composure because it was an emotional thing to him as he learned or as he thought about the things that he'd been through too. We've had so many wonderful thank you notes that come through. I just wanted to read a couple of them. My husband is so very proud of his quilt, and he shares it with everyone. He rarely speaks of his time in Vietnam and almost never of his return home to the States, but he never misses an opportunity to say how proud he is to have served his country. Your gift of the quilt touched him deeply. Our heartfelt thanks to you and the foundation. And one that says, this program to acknowledge veterans is a blessing for those of us that have served, and hope it continues for many years into the future. Thank you again for including me in the Quilts of Valor. And last one, as we each stood and smiled, wrapped warmly in our Quilt of Valor, we cherish the gift and the great honor bestowed upon us for serving our country. Many of them are able to come home now and share some of their experiences that they've had. One World War II vet's family said he'd never spoken of his service. Others say that they were able to start to talk about how they liberated concentration camps, how they fought at Iwo Jima. One nurse that we just awarded to was at D-Day at Iwo Jima, or at Omaha Beach, and on to many other things, even a concentration camp. So I hope that, as my little granddaughter says, when I asked her what is a hero, she says it's someone who would risk their lives to help somebody else. I hope that we too can continue to honor these veterans in this way and find some way that you can help Mr. Bartos with his Wounded Warrior Retreat, that we can continue to do that for these veterans as they come and heal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, they were going to show
Wow.
us the kind of quilts that we offer.
That is nice.
Gorgeous.
We're grateful for that opportunity.
Thank you for doing that for our veterans.
Please continue
Thank
for
you.
them.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I sense the board's very supportive of Mr. Bartos, but I'm going to hammer this nail home. My name is Jim Marcio. Some of you may remember me from the late 90s when I was the chief of CAL FIRE here and your Placer County fire chief. I'm also a Vietnam veteran, combat infantryman, having served in the 101st Airborne. Today, I represent the Gold Country Fly Fishers as its vice president. I'd like to speak to you today in support of Mr. Tom Bartos and his annual Wounded Warriors fly fishing program at the Horseshoe Bar Preserve. The Gold Country Fly Fishers have supported this effort for 8 years. We provide gear, we tie flies and provide flies for them. We provide some of our members to do the instruction and guide the Wounded Warriors. This is a worthy project that helps these seriously wounded veterans suffering tragic disabilities and in some cases PTSD overcome these debilitating effects of their wounds both physically and mentally. I'm not fully aware of some of the problems and issues that Tom's ran up against in trying to hold the event this year, but I do know the value of this program can't be overstated. Many people believe that that when wars are over, the need to help these men and women has gone away. Nothing could be further from the truth. Many are just being released from the hospitals where they were recovering from injuries. Now they have to adjust to going back to civilian life with injuries that most of us cannot even imagine. I have walked in these warriors' shoes. This program does a small part in saving this generation of warriors from going through the post-war traumas that my generation experienced. So I'm here to ask Placer County, through the board, to do what you can to allow the continuation of this worthy and valuable event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. Supervisor Montgomery.
Oh, sorry, my light is still on.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sammy White Eagle Rhodes, United States Army, medically retired. Tom Bartos puts on an awesome event. I can attest to it as being one of the few that has had a chance to go to the event, and as well as seeing the importance of it as to try and volunteer every year possible that I can for it. The things that he brings to the plate is just awesome. The show that he puts on, just proving to us that the camaraderie still is there for us. And it's just amazing to see the veterans that come together, that someone still cares.
You're doing fine.
So if there's anything we can do for Tom,
Thank you. We will. Thank you for coming forward.
I know you're in a hurry, so I'm not going to take up your time. My name is Jim Gocher. I'm the commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars up in Forest Hill, post number 11294. And I just want to let you know that there is urgency to this situation, which Tom has expressed, because the event takes place in the first week of October. So this is not something that can really be tabled. It is private property. It's not a commercial venture. No money exchanges hands. We as veterans in Forest Hill volunteer our time to set everything up, to help throughout the process, and to take everything down at the end of the week. So we just want to support Tom any way that we can, and let you know that this is not something that can be set aside, because these veterans plan on this. They're looking forward to this weeks on end, and this is taking place in about 4 weeks. So we really need to make sure that we can support him quickly. And again, it's private property. It's not a commercial venture. It's not something that should even be overseen by the county in a lot of ways. We're all volunteers. There's nobody pays to come down there. So we want to support him in any way that we can as well. And we thank you for your time on this.
Thank you. All of those that are in support of this project who have been working on it, would you please stand up, be recognized? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We really. And we'll be looking at this right away. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. I'm honored to be here. My name is Kevin Dredge. I am a father of two. I've spent the last 3 years of my life dedicated to being an advocate towards our students and mental health. I've been through several programs with our Placer County Youth Commission and also the California System of Friday Night Live. I received clearance through Placer County to be a volunteer through the Children's System of Care and also a volunteer for the Placer County Youth Commission, which is our students. I would like to thank you for providing what's coming up with the declarations into September being Colon Cancer Awareness Month, and also we are going to declare today readiness to be prepared for emergencies. And I know that schools are definitely one of our top focuses of safety and security with emergencies. So there's so many things that I'd like to say and that we'd like to say, but what I'm doing is I'm representing our students and our families for mental health, for depression, and also for our soldiers and our veterans and our heroes. So what I'm here to ask you is something that I spoke to you last Wednesday with the youth. This is a draft of a proclamation declaring this week is National Suicide Prevention Week, and it is to be together. So I understand that we're in a new standard operating procedures, basically with a new social transformation, and I'm asking if we can put this on the agenda for next week, and if we can get this approved.
We have that. Okay. We do have a request for that in, and we're working with the Health and Human Services.
Wonderful.
That'd be September 25th would be the soonest, so.
Wonderful.
All right.
Okay, well,
Correct.
thank you very much again for what you do.
Okay. All right,
What was
very
that?
good.
I'm sorry?
We're going to try to get it on the agenda for the September 25th, which is our next Board of Supervisors meeting.
Okay, September 25th. So when we say try, is there anything that the students and I can do to make sure that that does happen?
If the clerk can give you our email addresses, and if you want them to just contact us through email, be the best way to do it.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to address us under public comment? I don't see anyone in the Tahoe City office. No one there? All righty. Then I will close public comment and bring it back to the board for board member reports. Any reports from board members? County executive reports?
No.
No. All righty, good. Now we will move to our 9:05 timed item. County Executive Office, Office of Emergency Services, starring Holly Powers.
Chief Morris, do an update on the current fires, California and the county.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm George Morris, Unit Chief for the CAL FIRE Nevada Yuba Placer Unit, Placer County Fire Chief, and Placer County Fire Warden. Needless to say, this has been a trying summer for the public and first responders throughout the state. Last year, at this time, 250,000 acres had burned, and this year, 950,000 acres have burned so far. Over 1,000 homes and multiple lives of public and first responders have been taken. Firefighters from across the state have been engaged in efforts to mitigate these fires since July 3rd in a near continuous state of work, bouncing from one fire to the next. CAL FIRE has requested from the legislature an increase in the emergency fund to cover the cost of current and expected fire activity. We are 2 months into this fiscal year. Since the beginning of July, major fires have been burning statewide. The county fire kicked it off in Yolo County, ultimately consuming 90,000 acres. The Klamath Fire in Siskiyou County, 40,000 acres. The Ferguson Fire in Madera County, 97,000 acres. The Carr Fire in Shasta County, 228,000 acres, 1,000 homes destroyed. The River Fire in Lake County, 48,000 acres. The Ranch Fire, the largest in California history, at 459,000 acres in Lake, Mendocino, Colusa, and Glenn counties. The Hers Fire in Shasta and Siskiyou counties, 45,000 acres, and right now the Delta Fire burns in Shasta County is 50,000 acres and 5% contained. Locally, we've had multiple initial attack incidents, and for a time we had very minimal resources to deal with them due to the statewide response need. On August 7th, a series of fires were reported in the Sunset area, and again on the 14th. Investigators determined these fires were arson and were able to identify a suspect for the fires, culminating in his arrest on August 20th. Suspect was charged with 8 counts of arson in Placer County and is likely to be charged with more counts in Yuba and Sutter County. He's held on bail in Placer County Jail at $2.4 million. The North Fire in the Immigrant Gap area consumed approximately 1,300 acres last week and came at a time where competition for resources was not as critical, and we were able to commit sufficient resources with our partners in the Tahoe National Forest and got a good outcome for that fire. It's 77% contained today. The Sliger Fire started in El Dorado County last week, consuming 150 acres and causing the evacuations of parts of Todd Valley, and a considerable effort on the behalf of PCSO, CHP, CAL FIRE, and OES to make that happen over multiple days. The successes from this event will be carried forward to the next events, and statistically speaking, there will be more. Your readiness for wildfire, and this is for the public, couldn't be more critical. You got to be ready with a plan to evacuate, and the items that you need to sustain you should you evacuate. That includes insurance policies, meds, things that that you might not be coming home for a while, things that you're going to need if you're in an evacuation center. Register for Placer Alert and pay attention to news reports or follow CAL FIRE NEU or Placer CA on Twitter for incident updates. And remember, if you're told to evacuate, do so immediately. And if you feel that you should evacuate, don't wait for someone to tell you to.
This is a nice segue to Assistant Director of OES, Holly Powers, who's going to talk about Emergency Preparedness Month. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief Morris. Again, good morning, Chairman Holmes, member of the board. My name is Holly Powers. I'm the new Assistant Director of OES here at Placer County. Thank you again, Chief Morris. I just want to thank Placer. I also want to include in the thank you for the fires last week, also Placer County Sheriff's Office for their leading the immediate evacuation and the planning and contingency planning in case certain fires expanded. Also Placer County Health and Human Services for their ability to quickly and efficiently set up a human shelter and an animal shelter to support those communities that had displaced members. There were also numerous other county departments that were involved, and so it was wonderful here. I've been with the county for almost 2 months now, and to see the immediate response and willingness to cooperate and work together, not only in the county but with all of our partners, was just very heartwarming and encouraging here in Placer County. Due to those evacuations and the threats posed by those fires, we did activate the county's Emergency Operations Center at a very low level. It was mainly OES staff and a few other key partners from other departments in order to manage and gather information about the fires and also start planning in case they were expanding, as we have seen with other fires in California. And again, as I said, while I've only worked for the county for 2 months, it was very apparent that this response community here is wonderful. And we have so many partners willing to help and support our incidents, and specifically during the last week, the American Red Cross, some of our local transit providers, Placer Transit, Auburn Transit, and Pride Industries were integral in our evacuation planning and working together. But another partner that I really want to focus on today is our local citizens. In addition to our first responders, the impacted communities really deserve a thank you for their quick response to evacuation notices, actually leaving when there was a threat, and their patience while information was gathered and we worked to get them back in their homes as quickly and efficiently as possible. This truly is the essence of National Preparedness Month, which is why I'm here today to ask for September to be recognized as National Preparedness Month. I feel it's also important to lead off of Chief Morris and recognizing that 6 of the most destructive wildfires in California have struck in the last 10 years. And this is only going to continue the trend, and we do have to prepare not only at the county level and with our local governments, but really helping our citizens and reminding them that it really starts with you and that personal preparedness and making sure that you can sustain not only yourself but your family. While certain events are unavoidable, each of us as an individual has an opportunity to be prepared for in the event of a disaster. And this year's National Preparedness Month provides an opportunity to remind us all that we must prepare ourselves and our families now and throughout the year. This year we'll focus on planning with an overarching theme of disaster happens, prepare now, learn how. So each week of National Preparedness Month has a theme. Week 1 was make and practice your plan. This focuses on making a family emergency plan, signing up for Placer Alert to receive alerts, and discuss any evacuation plan that you may have with your family, not only out of your house but out of your community, and then practicing that plan with your family and neighborhood. Week 2 is learn life-saving skills, which will focus on familiarizing yourself with your home and any risks that your home may face, as well as learning to turn off things like your utilities, natural gas, your water, checking smoke alarms, maybe take a CPR class, and knowing that what hazards you may be exposed to, such as flood, fire, earthquake. Week 3 is check your coverage, and that's pretty simple. Just check your homeowner's coverage or your insurance, renter's insurance on your cars as well, making sure you have appropriate coverages. Week 4 is save for an emergency, and that's focused on creating an emergency financial aid first kit and the importance of maintaining emergency savings. For any of those interested, you can there are printable checklists and family activities focused on preparedness at www.ready.gov and also on the Placer County OES website. So in conclusion, while preparing for a disaster may seem overwhelming, the important thing to remember for our individual citizens is to just take it one step at a time. You may not realize how prepared you actually are. Do you have any camping supplies? Do you have canned goods in your cupboards? You already have some items on your preparedness checklist that'll get you ready to go if you have to evacuate. So step one is just make a plan and then start going from there. Because as we know, disasters happen. We need to prepare now, and let's learn how. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a proclamation that I'm going to read declaring September 2018 as National Preparedness Month in Placer County, but the board needs to approve it, so I'll ask for approval of the item.
I would move approval of the item. I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to Holly and for stepping in to Placer County. Luckily, with 2 fires that have not gotten any larger than they were. I think one of the things that I think is so critically important to remind people about is Placer County, in addition to doing the things that we do as a government, we work out in our communities as well. We have a number of fire safe councils, whether it's the Placer Sierra Fire Safe Council, the Greater Auburn Area Fire Safe Council, or the Forest Hill, Iowa Hill Fire Safe Council. We're really trying to get this messaging out to communities. And I think when I talk to other supervisors from other counties, they are very impressed by the steps that we have taken as a county. Obviously, we can always do more, but with limited resources, I think we're doing an incredibly good job. And I really want to take the opportunity to shout out to Luana Dowling, who manages so much of the community outreach piece of what we do. I don't think she's here today. Are you here, Lou? Nope, not seeing her. But she's just been an absolutely integral part of this. But I move the action.
All right.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the proclamation declaring September 2018 as National Preparedness Month in Placer County. Whereas National Preparedness Month is a nationwide effort held each September to highlight the importance of emergency preparedness. The Federal Emergency Management Agency and the American Red Cross, along with a variety of organizations throughout the United States, including local, state, and federal government agencies and the private sector, offer events, programs all month long to increase awareness about the importance of being prepared for a full range of emergencies. And whereas a major disaster such as a flood, wildland fire, earthquake, public health crisis, or terrorism could cause devastating loss of life and property and costly damage to the environment. And whereas each week, National Preparedness Month has a theme to help place focus on key components of being prepared. Make and practice your plan, learn life-saving skills, check your coverage, and save for an emergency. And whereas Placer County is committed to bringing together members of the community and government leaders to actively participate in emergency preparedness, planning, mitigation, response, and recovery. And whereas multiple resources are available to citizens to help ensure preparedness, including online tools such as Placer Alert, which allows people to sign up for notifications of disasters in their area, and My Hazards, which helps people learn about potential hazards that may affect them and how they can reduce risks to themselves and their property. And whereas personal preparedness and planning in advance is critical to an effective response to a disaster, it is vital that all community members take steps to prepare for emergencies at home, work, or school. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the above proclamation was duly passed by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Placer on behalf of the citizens of Placer County at its regular meeting held September 11th, 2018. So I will bring this down and present that to you. What? Didn't we vote? Oh, okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Sorry.
Sign your details. Get a second. That's why we pay you, Joey.
To pay attention to those details. Okay, Thank you. Now we will move to our 9:30 timed item. Update on the Emergency Homeless Shelter Alternative Site Evaluation. Mr. Ken Grimm.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. My name is Ken Grimm with the Department of Public Works and Facilities. And today we wish to update you on our review of potential alternative homeless shelter sites within the greater Foothill area here, the greater Auburn area. I think it's important to note that when we talk about shelter services, we talk about three areas. We talk about South Placer, which is really the areas of Rockland, Roseville, Lincoln, and all those areas kind of west of Loomis. We talk about the Foothills area, which is this greater Auburn area going up and down the hill a little bit. And then we talk about Tahoe. Today we're focused on the Foothill area, the greater Auburn area, and that's the effort we want to talk about today. Your board approved a 5-year limited term conditional use permit in 2017 to operate the current shelter that's located at the Placer County Government Center. 5-year conditional use permit is really a different kind of thing. We normally get conditional use permits, they go forever or as long as you adhere to your conditions of approval. But I think during the testimony, during that consideration, your board heard a lot of testimony that, hey, maybe there's a better site for a shelter here in the Auburn area. And so you instructed us to look at alternative sites and to come back annually to talk about how we are doing and where we're at in that process. That's what we're here to do today, to receive your direction, let you know what we're doing, and receive any further direction you wish to provide. We have, since that last time, also gone to several MAC meetings, a couple here in North Auburn as well as Newcastle, to talk about what we're doing and to collect some input into the process that we're doing. So, there we go. So first talking about the different sites that we reviewed. This is a very small map. We're going to enlarge it in just a moment, but I wanted people to see the greater magnitude of what we were looking at. And we looked for properties that were for sale. We actually looked at over 50 sites throughout the greater Auburn area. Looking at this map, we have, there it is, Interstate 80, 49, and then we have the airport area, just to get a little orientation. The government center is on there. The red number 0 is the current site that we have at the Placer County Government Center where we are operating a homeless shelter. The blue numbers identify actual parcels that we looked at. Again, over 50 of them. We'll get into a little more detail in a moment. Then some of the other things that we started to identify in this map that we heard were important in evaluating any potential sites. First, we wanted to say, hey, where are sites allowed by our current zoning, which is typically multifamily and many of our commercial areas. Those areas are shown on orange on this map. So that gives you an idea that really most of our areas are not zoned to accommodate a shelter. Doesn't mean a shelter couldn't be put there. It just means there would have to be more discussion and process and evaluation associated with putting it somewhere that isn't already zoned for it. We also heard a lot about schools, about trying to keep the shelters away from schools. So we took the public schools and actually even a private school that we were aware of, and we put these light blue and dark blue circles around those schools. So you'll see those circles radiating, and I think people were concerned about, well, some people would say they'd want them as far away as possible. Those circles represent 1,000 and 2,000 foot radiuses, so a little less than a quarter mile and a little less than a half mile radiuses around those school sites. There was also talk about overflight zones. You'll see those yellow ovals around the airport. Those signify the overflight zones that the Airport Land Use Commission has kind of suggested isn't the best location because of the vulnerable populations associated with a shelter site. And so they, again, not a litmus test, but they've suggested that that's not what they believe to be a good area for one. Then there was also a lot of discussion about residential areas, trying to keep it away from houses, and there's lots of houses in the Foothill area everywhere. But what we did in the pink areas, we have areas, the lighter pink, that are what I'll call more formal subdivisions, so they're higher density. And then when we drew those out, we noticed there were still areas that were not necessarily formal subdivisions, but they still had a higher density of residential houses in them. And so those are the darker pink areas you see there, and so you'll see a lot of those. Important to note that even areas outside of the pink that are in the areas that are non-shaded, there are homes in those areas too. Not to the same densities, but there are homes in those areas and other sorts of uses in those areas also. So with that, we identified really 4 areas. The area around the airport, the area along Highway 49, that commercial where you see all that orange, the Bowman area off Interstate 80, where you see a whole host of numbered spots, that commercial strip along Interstate 80, and then down on the lower right, or excuse me, lower left, you'll see the Newcastle area, Ophir Road, where there are some industrially zoned properties also. So talking a little bit more and getting a little bit more detail about the areas we looked at, and then we'll talk about how we evaluated them, or at least provide a guide for how we could look at it. This is the Highway 49, and it also shows the Nevada Street area. So the Nevada Street, which is the one in the lower right, that number 56, came to us. It's actually not in the unincorporated county. That's actually in the city of Auburn. We did take a look at it. You can see it is in a school area, and it is not zoned correctly, but it is one that we looked at. And there's a host of sites along the Highway 49 corridor. You'll see the overlapping school sites, a lot of those, particularly on the government center, overlap. And so that gives you a little bit of idea. Most of them right along Highway 49, except for 8 and 9, that are really in the industrial center right off Kemper Road, directly west of Highway 49. Here's the airport area with the largest concentration near really that Bell Road area and all the shopping centers. There's a lot of property still available there. But you can see they all are solidly within overflight zones, different versions of the overflight zone. You can see all the pink areas, particularly 17 and 27, you'll notice off to the right, actually don't have a lot of residential area there, but they are solidly in the airport overflight zone. This takes a little bit of look at the I-80 Bowman. There's a lot of old commercial malls and buildings there that are integrated together. Whole host of them. You can see we've looked at a lot of them. Some are existing buildings, some are vacant properties, all and up and down along that corridor. There is the Bowman School that's in the area. One thing that I think surprised us about this area was just how much residential area there is as soon as you get behind the freeway commercial along the freeway. And so I think that this kind of shows it with all the pink that's behind there. And then we have the Newcastle area, and there is an industrial strip. You can see there were a host of sites that we looked at. Some limited services there in terms of water and sewer, but there are sites that have it. I think you can notice there's not a lot of what we call these formal subdivisions, the pink. But I think the Newcastle folks would say, hey, but don't forget, there's a whole lot of houses mixed in there. They're just maybe not at the same densities as what we're used to seeing and how we created the pink areas in general. And not a lot of services in that area. So we talked about wanting to develop a tool for comparing the sites. No one's going to be able to read it. Don't try. I think the intent, we're going to blow some of this up in a moment. But what I wanted to make sure people know, we looked at over 50 sites. We looked at a host of criteria. We're going to go in a little bit more detail about what we found and what the criteria are. Not saying it's perfect criteria. It is just the criteria we chose to try to give us a way of comparing sites and to see, is there something that's better than where we're at today? Important also to note, at one time, I believe almost every one of these sites was for sale at one time or another during our search, but some have exchanged hands, some are for sale, some are no longer for sale. So I think it's important to note that is true. Not everything is still for sale. Some are and some are not. So let's talk a little bit about the criteria that we took a look at. So we broke it down, and I think when we went to the community meetings, we discussed this, broke it down into really 3 areas: community criteria, shelter criteria, and site development criteria. And we divvied up the points, nothing magical about it, but we said, hey, with what we heard, we put half the points in community. So we focused really on that community criteria. But then we also provided about a quarter, or technically 27%, of the points under shelter criteria, because we wanted to make sure a site could operate well for its intended purpose. And then we also looked at the site development criteria, and that was technically 23% of the points. And the site development criteria was really how easy would it be to develop a shelter use on that property. We did not look at cost as a direct criteria, but some of the site development criteria do go at least to some of the costs associated with developing a site. little more detail on the community criteria, just so it's clear. Distance to school, we heard that, so we used those concentric circles and said, hey, if you're greater than 2,000, you're going to get the maximum points. If you're between 1,000 and 2,000, you get some points. You get less points if you're greater between 500 and 1,000, and if you're less than 500 feet, you get 0. We did something similar with your distance to a residential community. Those are those pink areas. And we just, again, used those 1,000 and 2,000 kind of foot criteria, giving different amounts of points the further away the residential area was from that site. We also thought it was also important to talk about the first house, to kind of go to that idea that, you know, may not be as dense, but there are still people living there, or if there are people living there, we wanted to give that some sort of credit or not credit, depending on the situation. And so we also did a second one for residential, that the distance to the first house, first residential area that we could identify on a map. We also gave some points if you were not in an overflight zone, and you also got some points if you were zoned commercially or appropriately for a homeless shelter under our zoning ordinance. Then on the shelter criteria, we talked about, hey, proximity to social and public services. The closer you are, they're in need of those services. If you're closer, that's a benefit. We talked about your proximity to public transit. The closer you are, the more points you would get, because it allows people to get to wherever they want to go in the greater world. We included distance to shopping and employment, because we want people to be able to get the services they need, the employment places they need to get to. So we provided some different points depending on your distance away from those types of facilities. And then also through the community discussions we had, people said, hey, it should be walkable, that if you're going down roads that are real narrow with no shoulders, there should be some allowance that places that have sidewalks or wider places to walk should have some sort of credit associated with that. And so we did put that, and we provided a nominal amount that if it was more walkable, i.e. sidewalks, you got some points for that. And finally, at the site development criteria, we gave points if you had water service. Very difficult to operate a shelter on a well. Not that it can't be done if you have a productive enough well, but probably difficult to do in our area. So we gave points for that. If you had sewer service to the parcel, you got points for that. Trying to provide sewer service to a shelter, again, probably a pretty difficult thing to do with the intensity of that use. We also gave points that if you had an existing structure, particularly if that building was greater than 10,000 square feet, where it might be large enough to operate, we said, let's recognize that. If you had an existing structure, but it wasn't 10,000 square feet, we would still give you some points, but not as many. And if you had nothing, then you just didn't get any points in that site development criteria. And then the last one was having a relatively level lot size, 1 to 5 acres, which is what we think we need to operate a shelter of the type that we're doing. And so you got some points for doing that also. Again, not to say this is magical. You could change the numbers. You could change the distances. We tried to provide something we thought was reasonable that we could at least start the discussion with.
And Ken, if I can interrupt real quickly, this criteria and these discussion points, these are things that the community brought forward. They weren't something that you just cooked up.
Absolutely. I mean, we brought this to each of the, I think we've definitely heard the community criteria. So that is really centered on what we heard from the community. The shelter criteria, probably more from the providers. Site development criteria, probably more us, because we can kind of consider us the ones that would make it more likely to be buildable.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point because there's a lot of misinformation about how the county comes up with this criteria, you know, as far as where it comes from. So thank you.
Welcome.
And again, Ken, the community criteria was 50% of the point total?
50% of the total score. Okay. So it was the single, and the other two were approximately a quarter.
Okay.
So let's talk about what we kind of found out. So this rounds up the points, looks at all those 50-something sites. We're going to take them in groupings by area and let you know kind of what we found. So first, looking at the Highway 49 area and the airport, we combined those two because there is a lot of intersection there, particularly in the Bell Road area. First off, we show the existing site up there. You know, whether you agree with the point, we've got it. We're using that as our baseline for our 75 points, and so we're looking for areas that are close to that. Not to say hopefully there'd be something vastly superior, but we're just looking for things that are close. We found 4 sites that we thought kind of started getting into the range. One was what's number 4 up there. It's off Heritage Oaks Place, which is adjacent to the Government Center. Really, it scored very much similar to the Government Center site, with the exception of it's on its own lot, and so it got the points of having its own lot while the Government Center did not. But otherwise, it scored equally the same. You know, there are some schools in the area. There is some residential. Scored very similar. I think some of the concerns we heard in the community when we did have some discussions was some of those areas, wow, they're so close to the existing site. Is that really an improvement over where they're at today? I think, at least from a good chunk of people, we heard that, hey, it needs to be further away from where it's at. There are 2, 8, and number 9, which are off Industrial and Kemper. That's a little industrial area right next, tucked into the railroad tracks, right off where New Airport Road turns into Kemper, right there by Highway 49, but slightly off. They scored relatively well, did very well in the community area because the schools are all far enough away to get the full points. But they are starting to get a little bit further away from some of the services, and there still is some residential area in there. So they're kind of a little mix of both, not too far away, though, again, from where the current site is. The other one I'd like to at least pay some note to is number 17, which is Airport Park. That was the one that's kind of off by itself by the airport, very adjacent to the airport. So it is in that high overflight zone, but it had very high community scores because there is literally very little residential within that area. That's the area just north of Saronics and the Ridge Golf Course, tucked up against the airport. So that had some potential existing building already, so very good, but it is in the overflight zone. Then moving over to the I-80 Bowman area, not a lot there, I think. I think I'll pay special note to number 40, which for those who may know, I think that's Sam's Hofbrau, scored pretty well. A lot of those are stores. It's not one shopping center. Those shopping centers are separate parcels, so there's other stores. There are separate parcels within one shopping center. And so in the middle of some of these shopping centers, like this one, scored similar to the Government Center in most ways. Other than that fact that they're further away from the services, there is residential tucked behind there. There are some services, but not as close as they are at the Government Center, but it scored similar to the Government Center. And I think it's important here on that Bowman area, I kind of highlighted when we looked at the map, about a lot of pink right behind all the commercial area are residential. There's a lot of subdivisions on both sides of the freeway, behind the commercial, a lot of homes. Last area there's 2 areas here. Both Newcastle and Nevada Street. I'll start with Nevada Street at the bottom. It did not score as well, but I take note of it because we did look at a site that was actually in the city of Auburn. It's an old church, or I shouldn't say an old church, it's a relatively new church there, off Nevada Street, that was for sale, and so it had some potential. Has some of the same issues everywhere else does. There's the school there not too far away. There's residents, all the same types of things, but it starts getting a little further away from the shelter, and I must say, for anything in the city of Auburn, not necessarily within 100% within your board's approval to make it happen. The Newcastle area, we took a look at that, and what really takes note through here is that they got very good community criteria points in general because they're away from everything. There are no subdivisions. But I do know we had a lot of real interested people in the Newcastle area who came talk to us about it when we were out there. There was a lot also. There was probably well over 100 people, so they were very interested in what was coming out. That although they got very good community criteria points, I think they would argue, well, yeah, we're large lot residential, we're not the subdivisions, and we were really looking for that density, being further away from that density, and they are. But there are still homes that would be near that area. So very good community criteria points, but you'll also notice very poor on the shelter criteria points because it is a little more rural and a little more away from everything that's out there. They still got some points. There's still some transit out there. but relatively speaking, they did very poorly in the shelter criteria. And development criteria was mixed, not quite as easy to develop there as some other places, but still could be done. So kind of in conclusion here, where we're at. So right now, in our opinion and our recommendation is that there really is not a superior site that we've been identified that I think the community could get behind. I think everything we kind of came up with, the community, there would be someone, particularly around that area, that took exception to that site. No one could galvanize around any given area. So if someone thinks there is a better site, definitely would be happy to look at that and interested in seeing if that can be made to work. So unless we get any new information, I think our recommendation from the department level would be there is no apparent superior site. We do believe we should keep our eyes and ears open moving forward. If a site comes up, we will evaluate it, bring it forward to your board for consideration. But we're suggesting we stop the active search. A lot of time, resources, and money goes into doing this, whether it's ourselves, whether it's our broker, that we've done a lot, over 50 sites. Unless there's a new area that comes up that people think they can galvanize behind, we stop the active search, keep our eyes and ears open for a site when it may come up, and we monitor the current site. We do have a new operator at the current site, see how that goes over the coming year, and we can reevaluate that stance next year or whenever people decide that it needs to be reevaluated. And with that, be happy to try to answer any questions and allow you to hear from the community.
Ken, I want to thank you and your staff for going through this exercise, and I particularly want to thank you for enduring the Newcastle Over Mac meeting. You called it several people, but it was a mob. They certainly didn't want to see that in their area. Whether we like it or not, the shelter, the mid-placer shelter in the Wood campus is now in effect. The community has become engaged with the mission of the Gathering Inn. We've hired 4 new deputies to monitor the transient population, and so I see no need to move any further on this issue. So those are my comments. Supervisor Duran.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Ken. I know myself and Jen being part of the kind of the brainstorming on moving this particular item forward. I know I'm very satisfied with how we approached this and how the community was involved. I think that's the most important thing for me, is that they really stepped up to the plate and they were at the meetings. They were, trying to, they were understanding the need and trying to come up with criteria that I think, everybody would feel comfortable with, and that's the most important thing. And I think in the event that there is going to be any movement down in South Placer, that we've got now a decent template that can go ahead and we can utilize that if and when that event decides to happen. And again, I want to be very clear that what we were doing here was being driven by the county. What's being doing down in South Placer is not being driven by the county. So that's that's the truth of the matter. So all right, thank you.
All right. Supervisor Montgomery.
Ken, thank you for the presentation. I had forgotten actually that we had looked at quite so many different parcels, so that was worthwhile to recap that. Really wanted to, similarly to Chairman Holmes and Supervisor Duran, extend my thanks to county staff, but particularly to the community members who participated in this and really helped us determine what are the criteria that we think as a society, as a community, is necessary to be met for a shelter. I think it's really important to note, because I do still hear occasionally from people that we just shouldn't offer a shelter at all in Placer County, that just 6 days ago the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a legal requirement for entities to provide homeless shelters, and not providing them means you cannot ban them from camping on public properties. And so I think it's very important that we really understand that while this is the right thing to do from a legal, ethical standpoint, it is also a legal requirement for us, I would say. I'm not an attorney, but I read the LA Times. So thank you for that. I would suggest along the lines of Chairman Holmes that we discontinue an active search, but we should definitely keep our eyes open, as I know I will, Occasionally people do reach out to me and say, hey, have you looked at this property? Most of the time I am able to say, yes, we have, and here's why that didn't work. But I do think that we should continue to look for that unicorn property that's sort of the perfect mythological creature. It may be out there. We just may not have identified it through this process, but we should not continue to put a ton of county time and resources to it unless it really is brought to our attention. So I'm asking the public, if there's something that is a better site, please bring it to our attention so that we can review it. Thank you.
Seeing no more comments, is there anyone in the audience wish to address us in this item? Mr. Kevin Hanley, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Board of Supervisors. I would also like to thank county staff, your Public Works Director and Health Department for their efforts in searching for an alternative site. I just want to give some kind of constructive comments on the criteria scoring tool that was used to make these decisions, because I believe that the way the scoring tool was constructed, the assumptions underneath basically determine that an urban site near county offices will be the best alternative for the shelter. I think, first of all, the community needs criteria, the 50% weight is good. I think that's a solid method to use. I do have some suggestions on the shelter needs, which has a 25% weight to it. If you look at the criteria there, you have to ask yourself, what is the correlation between proximity to various services and success for the homeless person? Namely, getting a roof over their heads, job, off of substances if they're addicted to substances, and off government assistance. That's success. There's no correlation between those shelter criteria and achieving success, because if you look at Acres of Hope, that is a place far away from services, but it's a very successful program. So you have to look at the model as the most important criteria for shelter needs rather than what you have, and that's 25% weight. The other 25% weight on development criteria kind of assumes that you have one big shelter, 100 persons, where you have maybe 5 different populations, people on substance abuse, mentally ill, women escaping violence, panhandlers, other criteria, economically homeless, they lost their job and so forth. So I think if you say we're not going to have smaller shelters that try to meet the needs of those particular populations and assume one big shelter, I think you're off on the criteria. So I have 2 recommendations for you. One, the easiest recommendation is you give a greater weight than 50% to the community needs, because that is the one criteria that is really solid to help you make a decision. The second is you rethink the shelter needs with your strategic plan that your consultant, Thurman Associates, is coming up with, and also the development criteria. Look at different models, and you're going to get a better solution, because right now you have 0 alternative sites. Because I think the way this criteria scoring model was constructed, you're always going to have that same site as the best choice. So you, as policymakers, need more options, and I ask you to take a look at the criteria scoring model. Thank you very much.
Hi, Sherry Cusick from Rockland. I just want to address to Mr. Duran's point about any movement in South Placer is not driven by the county. But wouldn't the county have to approve that? Wouldn't it be up to the county? So if Placer Rescue Mission does go in 4242 Cincinnati Avenue, it would have to be approved by the county. And I know to the criteria, to the needs, they talk about the distance from neighborhoods, distance from schools, and I know this is probably not a project yet, Placer Rescue Mission, I don't know where you guys are at with this, but Placer Rescue Mission is 2.2 miles from my neighborhood, about 1.5 miles from the new retirement villas right there. As far as schools, it's 1.3 miles from William Jessup, 0.8 miles from Western Sierra Academy. It's a little over 0.5 mile from the Rockland Academy, which has direct access under Highway 65. So if we're using these criterias, I think that's a little close when we get to that point. As far as proximity to social services, employment, shopping, if you look at Placer Rescue Mission's FAQs, it's going to be fully self-contained. I mean, they're going to have clothing and food and groceries and a chapel and daycare and a fitness center. I mean, on and on and on. I mean, it sounds, permanent housing, temporary housing, addiction places, detox centers. So again, this is fully self-contained, so I don't see why it would need to be, within a couple miles of neighborhoods, schools. Also, when you talk about walkability for employment, 88% of residents, according to the Placer County's comprehensive health assessment, 88% of Placer County residents commute to work. So I don't know where the employment will be for the people. But anyway, my point is, Dr. Marbu also said that one large shelter would likely not work, so it should be a couple shelters, and he mentioned Roseville, Auburn, and Tahoe area. So again, I know this is not a project yet. I just wonder, where are we at with this? Are we getting close to any agreements with Placer Rescue Mission? Has anybody had any contact?
And again, I think you're misconstruing what I was saying about being driven. This particular project was a shelter that would be driven by the county. What may or may not be happening in South Placer isn't driven by the county. So
right. No, I understand that.
It's dependent upon whether or not Placer Rescue Mission wants to move forward with it and pull permits. So until and unless they come to us and say, hey, we're ready to do something, whether it be an additional contract for the property or, we want to do something different, that's on them. That, there's
we know they want the property at 4242 Cincinnati, and in November, Cartwright said it would cost about $2 million, which we know constructions will overrun, so it'll be about $3 million for our taxpayer county to pay to bring the property up to standards.
Don't understand the difference between a county-driven project where the county is going to pay for it, like when we build a health and human services building, and a private project.
But that's county land, right?
PRM is a private project.
I understand that. But they want county land. 4242 Cincinnati is county property, correct?
That is correct.
And that's what they want. And if it's given to them, it would have to be brought up to standards before it's given to them or before it's sold.
But again, the developer has to bring that up to code.
So the county will not have to pay?
The county is not on the hook for that.
Okay.
There's not. She's talking. If you want to talk, please come up to the podium. If the county's not on the hook for anything, so if it's just like a private developer wants to come in and build a building for for whatever they want to do, they come in. The county says you have to do this, and this until you get your permits.
Right.
County doesn't pay for that.
But if the county, the property is the county, so the county gives Placer Rescue Mission the land?
The county's not giving anything to anybody. And again, this is all part of the misinformation that is going out there. All right. Right now, the county has a use agreement with Placer Rescue Mission for just entry. All right. Nobody's given or contemplated giving anything, and I doubt anybody on this board is going to be giving away property to anybody.
So they would purchase the land from the county?
I have no idea what they're going to do. That's the whole point here, is that there's no project until they come forward and tell us what they want to do. And people are just pulling their hair out thinking that something's going to happen tomorrow.
Well,
that's just it.
I talked to David Loya at the last Board of Supervisors meeting. Anyway, my concern is that when you read Placer Rescue Mission's FAQs, they themselves talk about Cincinnati Avenue, which is county property, and if it goes out there, if everything's approved, it's too close to schools. It's based on the criteria that Mr. Grimm talked about. It's too close to schools. It's too close to residentials. It's going to be it would be fully self-contained, so it wouldn't need to be. It could be further out, and it sounds like you've had a problem finding properties. I understand that, but it could be further out because it's fully self-contained. And then my concern was when they talk about this being a emergency shelter criteria scoring tool. Is there a reason it's called emergency shelter?
I think that's just more the terminology, that it's not meant to be forever. It's
okay.
Meant to be relatively short term.
Okay.
And so
right, it was in May of, it's been 2 years.
We haven't heard back from them at all. As far as I know.
And I guess if I could add,
Yeah,
if anything were to ever come up, it would have to come to your board for consideration, and that there would be discussion about that and an opportunity to have that discussion. I have not had a discussion with them, since the feasibility study was done. I think they are interested. I think they are looking at what their options are. They probably will someday maybe put together a proposal, but it's all speculative for us right now to think what they may or may not do.
And again, that's the difference between a private project and a public project.
Right. I understand the difference.
We're waiting on them if and when they ever come. They may never come. And then on top of that, they've got to raise $30 million to get going. So, why everybody's pulling their hair out right this second, I have no idea.
Well, we just want to be prepared. We don't want to be surprised like Auburn was. Auburn was kind of blindsided, and Auburn was, you guys were told that there'd be no cost to the county. There'd be, it was going to be run by Volunteers of America, right-hand Auburn. And now we're over $1 million a year into Auburn, and I just don't want to see the same thing happen. Again, I talked to David Loy, I've talked to different people.
And it has been an overwhelming success.
Pardon?
I said it's been an
I'm
overwhelming success.
not saying it hasn't been, but it has cost taxpayers money that it wasn't supposed to, and that's my fear, with and Cincinnati Avenue, that when donations run out, who's going to pay for it once it's on county?
I'm not sure if the clerk got your name.
Sherry Cusick.
Okay, all right. You got it. You got the name. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning. Kim Costo from Rockland. First of all, I would have to wholeheartedly disagree with the overwhelming success. I guess that depends on who you ask regarding the Auburn shelter. I just had a couple quick questions regarding the conditional use permit or the use permit we were speaking of, 4242 Cincinnati, and was there a zoning change on that property?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is not agendized item. We don't have anything on the agenda regarding Rockland. We're here talking about the Auburn location. We don't have staff that's prepared for this. This is not an appropriate time for this conversation.
I thought we were discussing
No, we're talking about site locations in Auburn.
Go ahead and finish your comments.
Okay.
As I said, the site access agreement with Placer Rescue Mission has expired, and they haven't come back and expired in May. So I don't know what.
Okay, and was there a zoning change done to that property? If so, when and why?
We haven't done anything other than allow the access agreement last year or the year before, and there's nothing going on at our end, as far as I know.
I think to her question, there was zoning changes not specific to that property. Right. I think there were zoning changes countywide to some properties. So those changes, and I think, Ken, there was a zoning change.
Maybe I can just add a little bit to it. There was a discussion, particularly with the discussion around Auburn, that traditionally shelters were allowed in multifamily areas and in some commercial areas, but all the discussion we heard from the community was put it in more industrial commercial areas, get it out more, or at least allow it outside the residential and in more commercial areas. So there was a zoning text amendment done a couple years ago that allowed and opened up that shelters could be in commercial areas, particularly heavy commercial areas, because that's what we heard from the community.
And again, that was countywide.
Countywide.
Wasn't specific to Roseville, wasn't specific to anything. It was countywide.
Okay. So I've lived in Placer County and was in Auburn 45 years now, and we have property out off of Bell Road that's family property, and we have not had good success. I have a 75-year-old mother that's had trouble going to the store or the bank at times, right at Bell and 49 because of homeless issues. So I would say that that's not a huge success, and as Sherry said, we do need to be ahead of this, prepared if something were to come forward, rather than try to backtrack, which is what we're all doing right now. Thank
All right.
you.
Supervisor Wygant, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just offer up the Rockland site is in my supervisorial district, and I concur with Supervisor Duran that there's an awful lot of miscommunication floating around. If you have a list of specific questions and you direct that to my office, I'll get you very explicit, specific answers back. And then I think you've heard that it's horribly premature at this point in time to have very extensive development of that conversation, because there simply is nothing going on right now.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more public comment, thank you for the update and good work. Thank you, everybody that came here for this issue. Now we will move to our department items.
Thank you, Ken.
Item number 3, Sheriff, replacement vehicle purchases, California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Mr. Mark Giacomini.
Make sure you can hear me.
Because you are so soft-spoken.
What's that?
Did you lose your voice? All right, proceed.
Morning, Chairman Holmes, members of the board, Mr. Leopold, Mr. Carden, Mark Giacomini with the Placer County Sheriff's Office. Here to talk to you this morning about purchasing replacement vehicles. Specifically, seeking your approval to award a purchase order to the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services 1122 Public Safety Procurement Program of Mather, California, for the purchase of 15 patrol vehicles and 10 non-patrol vehicles in the maximum amount of $904,550. Also seeking your authority to give the purchasing manager your authorization to give the purchasing manager the authority to sign all resulting orders as a result of this request, and additionally to purchase additional vehicles under the Governor's Cal OES 1122 program within the fiscal year, provided the requests are appropriately budgeted and have been previously approved by your board and added to the Master Fixed Asset List. I want to speak to that last point, and the reason we do that, we make that request, is because oftentimes we will replace vehicles throughout the year that exceed the purchasing manager's authority, but really don't need to come to the board because it's already in the budget and it's on the Master Fixed Asset List. As an example, the 10 non-patrol vehicles we're replacing, that's 10 of 20 that are on the Master Fixed Asset List. The patrol vehicles, there are 6 two-wheel drives, 9 four-wheel drives that are being replaced in accordance with the MOU at 110,000 and 125,000 miles respectively. And open for any questions.
Supervisor Euler.
Yes, Mr. Chair. My question is in regard to the replacement cycle for these vehicles. You've indicated when we met that it is dictated by the MOU. I'm wondering, do we have any idea how long ago those mileages were inserted into our MOU for replacing vehicles?
Sir, no, I don't. It was before my time, but I do know that it's based on industry standards and safety records of CHP and other law enforcement agencies in the state.
Okay.
I can find out for you how long it's been in our MOU.
We're now dealing with manufacturers' warranties of 10 years, 100,000 miles on
Sure.
an awful lot of vehicles being produced. Things are becoming better made and longer utilized. And I'm just looking at this as one of those things that I think we need to be, instead of having an arbitrary standard that just says at this mileage these things will be retired, the vehicles should be evaluated. If they can continue in service for another 10, 15, 20,000 miles, it's a substantial savings to the county if we're not replacing these things prematurely. If things aren't falling off the vehicle, if the vehicle's still performing, why are we replacing these things? And I realize that you're not here defending that policy. That's actually for us to decide as a negotiated item within our MOU. But
Sure.
it certainly, I appreciated the conversation where You and I had the chance to talk about it, and as our board continues forward working with our various units, these are the kinds of things precisely that I want to see us looking at, to say, just because the decision was made along these lines 10 years ago or whenever, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best practice for us as a county today. I mean, obviously there are vehicles that get retired early if things happen to them. Well, if you have a vehicle that's been fairly well maintained, as all these vehicles are, I mean, we know we maintain these things very well.
Yes, sir.
Then what's wrong with keeping them around a few more years? So that's the reason I bring this up today.
So you would like us to take a look at the mileage requirement?
I think that this would be a good time for CEO's office to look at that and any other things where we've just kind of operated on autopilot, if you will, where it does have a real world cost impact to us. I mean, if you got a vehicle that's 110,000 miles and we can get another 20,000 miles out of, why not?
Well, many of those vehicles are road hard and put away wet. They're on the road all the time and
Sure.
have different kinds
Yes,
of
sir, they are.
services.
I would just say, I would point out to that point, a number of the vehicles we'll be replacing this year are only 2 years old.
And I have no problem when you can look at a vehicle and it's shot, great, because it's been driving around Roberts District and the roads are lousy or something. I don't know what the case is, but the driving on those gold roads that we have in Granite Bay, maybe it doesn't need to be put away.
Right. Conversely, I will say the briefing that I sent out to you said some of the as an example, some of the non-patrol vehicles we're replacing are 22 years old.
Yeah.
So we keep them in our fleet, the non-patrol, as long as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Duran, did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I was just to go to Kirk's point. I think it's always good to take a look at what options are available. If it's a matter of just getting an extended warranty for an additional time, for additional coverage, that's going to be costing less than obviously going out and purchasing a brand new vehicle. But I just think that we should always be, for all of our equipment, looking at different options, lifetime, those kinds of things. I mean, the biggest example that we've seen so far is with fire trucks, and how every time they take it out for a run, the big ones, it just kills, it just kills the life of that vehicle. So I just think we just need to be ultra prudent, because there's cost savings everywhere. And if we can squeeze a couple extra miles out of these cars, I think it's worth the public to do it. I know Jim is an expert on this stuff because you own a repair shop, so I'm going to take what Jim has to say as gospel. So.
Thank you. Anybody in the audience wish to address us on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for approval. Second. It's been moved and seconded with comments included with item 3, sheriff replacement vehicle purchases, and authorize purchasing manager to sign all resulting purchase orders for this request, as well as requests for purchase additional vehicles.
Easy for you to say.
Wow, I speak English. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr.
Fantastic.
Duckney.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll move to item 4, Health and Human Service Children's System of Care, Functional Family Therapy and Bilingual Therapist Services.
Good morning, Chair Holmes, Mr. Carden, Mr. Leopold, Supervisors. Twyla Abrahamson here for the Children's System of Care, and I'm happy to be presenting this item. So in 2014, Placer County issued a request for proposals to select a contractor to oversee its functional family therapy program here in Western Placer and bilingual therapy in Tahoe. Both those programs were awarded a contract for services with your board's approval on September 23, 2014. This contract was renewed on July 11, 2017 through your board's action in approving 19 total contracts, all funded through Proposition 63 Mental Health Services Act dollars. As part of their current agreement, Sierra Mental Wellness Group already has an embedded functional family therapist in CSOC that is part of our FFT team with 2 other CSOC mental health therapists. This FFT team has historically had 4 therapists to deliver these much-needed in-home family therapy services. Only having 3 currently is creating a capacity issue for families to receive the service. Approval of this contract amendment and funding will allow SMWG, See Our Mental Wellness Group, to offer 2 FFT therapists to bring the team to full capacity. So we're requesting that your board take the following action. Approve a contract amendment with See Our Mental Wellness Group for functional family therapy and bilingual therapist services from July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2020, increasing the funding by $176,963 for a total amount of $751,616. Also, to authorize the Director of Health and Human Services to sign this amendment and to sign subsequent amendments should they be needed, consistent with the subject matter and scope of work, and always with risk management and County Council concurrence. So of this total contract, expenditures of $280,033 for the period of July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019 are included in the department's fiscal year 18-19 final budget, and the $280,033 will be included in the department's fiscal year 19-20 proposed budgets. These expenditures are funded by 98% federal and state revenues for $548,865 and a 2% required county general fund match of $11,201. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, does anybody in the audience have questions regarding this issue? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for action. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 4, Health and Human Services Children's System of Care. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to item 5, Public Works and Facilities, Job Order Contracting. This is presented by Mr. Rob Unholz. Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Chairman Holmes, members of the board. I'm Rob Unholz with Department of Public Works and Facilities. Today, we're requesting that your board approve plans and specifications for job order contracting with an estimated probable construction cost not to exceed $4.4 million, including contingency, project management, and authorized staff to solicit bids. The term of each of 4 contracts under this solicitation will be 1 year from the date of the first job order. Funding for the projects constructed under these contracts is included in the fiscal year 2018-19 proposed budget capital improvements fund. This solicitation is a departure from the past. We typically have bid 2 contracts at a time, and that's left us with little flexibility in case workload on a particular contract is high and the availability is an issue, or the performance is an issue. We'll be recommending award of 4 bids to allow maximum flexibility. We're also changing it up. Previously, we had a $50,000 minimum contract award or a job order award. No minimum contract value. The estimated maximum is still $1 million per contract. And the county still reserves the right to exercise an option to increase the maximum contract values to the amount currently authorized by the Public Contract Code, which is approximately $4.9 million. And we've never gotten close to that. As your board may recall, job order contracting is an indefinite quantity contract by which contractors perform a variety of projects consisting of specific tasks at different locations. The scope is general construction, repair, remodel, and other repetitive related work for DPWF. It's based on the construction task catalog, which are tasks with preset unit prices developed and customized by the Gordian Group Incorporated. All unit prices are based on local labor, material, and equipment, including prevailing wages. Contractors will again be required to bid 3 sets of 2 adjustment factors to be applied to the unit prices in the CTC. The first set is performing work on general facilities in the county, excluding Forest Hill area and east of Donner Summit. The second set is performing that work in the remote facilities in the Forest Hill area and east of Donner Summit. And the third set is performing work on secure facilities such as adult corrections and juvenile detention. All three sets include normal and non-normal working hours. DPWF will determine the scope of an individual job order. The contractor will develop a proposal using the appropriate tasks, quantities, and applicable adjustment factors. Staff will evaluate the proposals in detail and issue a job order if found acceptable. Staff will return to your board to award the bid for 4 job order contracts and authorize the Director of DPWF or designee to execute individual job orders in an amount not to exceed $250,000 upon review and concurrence by Council and Risk Management, and delegate authority to approve supplemental job orders consistent with the County Purchasing Manual and Section 20142 of the Public Contract Code. Any project exceeding $250,000 will be brought back to your board for separate approval. And again, the contract terms will be 1 year from the issuance of the first job order. The estimated cost is $4.4 million, including $4 million in construction and $400,000 for project management, force account, and contingencies. JOC is, it's good to keep in mind, JOC is a delivery method. It's a tool in our toolbox, and it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of method. Funding for projects constructed under these contracts is included in the 2018-19 proposed budget capital projects fund. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from board members? Supervisor Montgomery.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for the presentation, and nice haircut, by the way. Just wanted to ask a little bit about the sets of adjustments that we use. I'm a little bit intrigued by the fact that in the Forest Hill area, we consider that a remote facility. It's 17 miles, roughly 19 miles away from here. We have other areas just west of the Donner Summit delineation point that are significantly farther than that don't fall into this remote category. What's the distinction between that?
They were developed as, we have experienced higher costs in bid costs in the Forest Hill area and certainly east of the summit. I'm not sure where the ideal breaking point is, but we kind of had to make an adjustment somewhere because the costs do go quite a bit higher, certainly in the basin.
Yeah. I would just suggest that, certainly not in relation to this specific action that we're being asked to take today, but we, as similar to what Kirk was asking the Sheriff's Department to do, to take a look at that sort of arbitrary mileage. We take a look at this, because I'm kind of wondering if this is the horse or the cart that's pushing this. I'm wondering if those bids are higher because people know that we have these adjustments available. And so I would suggest that we maybe we review both Forest Hill and Tahoe area. I'd also suggest that in the Eastern Placer County area, we actually work with the Contractors Association of Truckee Tahoe pretty closely on a lot of various and sundry issues. I would suggest that for this particular contract and in the future, we actually reach out to them to see if we can get some folks up in the far Eastern Placer area to actually provide the work rather than sending someone there and having to give them some sort of supplemental benefit to doing that.
We typically reach out to contractors associations with all of our construction bids, and we'll make sure that that occurs here as well. It is interesting with the adjustment factors, even for the remote locations. They're certainly in a building economy like this, the last bid probably doesn't cover their costs. Because it's a competitive bid environment, we often get the low bid, you have to wonder how they actually can do the jobs, but they contract to do them. But we will look into where an appropriate line may be drawn based on location of sites that we do work on and that the county owns.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, anyone in the audience wish to address us on this item? Anyone in Tahoe? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for action. It's been moved and seconded to approve item 5, Public Works and Facilities, job order contracting. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Hearing none, the item is moved. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
And now, we are going to adjourn to closed session.
The board will now adjourn to closed session for a conference with legal counsel to discuss one item of existing litigation. The board will then have a conference with its labor negotiators regarding negotiations with the Deputy Sheriff's Association. And the board will also adjourn as the board and convene as the Placer County In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority for a conference with its labor negotiators regarding the United Domestic Workers of America negotiations.
All righty. What do you think? Kiss of death. A kiss of death.
We need to talk about Rockland.
I did send you, Jerry, that they were going to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we're back in session and from closed session, and
The board has returned from closed session where they had a conference with legal counsel. In that matter, they heard a report and authorized the defense of a former employee, Dr. David Clark, in the matter before the Medical Board of California. The board also had a conference with its labor negotiators, heard a report, and gave direction to its labor negotiation team. The board adjourned as a Board of Supervisors and convened as the Placer County In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority for a conference with its labor negotiator on that matter, and heard a report and gave direction to their labor negotiator in that matter. They then adjourned as the In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority and re-adjourned in the board and came out here.
all right. Thank you. That concludes our meeting. Thank you.